Welcome back to another episode of the Briefcase in the Barn, episode 45, with me and Gary, a series of the Furiously Curious show where we talk about business, life, Christianity, more. Let's get into it. Ready?
Always ready.
Okay. Got any questions off the start?
How's your week going?
Not bad.
Yeah.
Getting ready to leave on Thursday, Oklahoma. Go record a podcast with Trey. So, ready for that?
Who's all going to Oklahoma? Just you?
Yeah.
Okay. How long are you there for?
Thursday to Monday.
Yeah.
Yeah, gonna go down there and spend much time in the yard on the weekend.
What's the first thing you think of when you hear about Oklahoma?
Big open space. You?
Timothy McVeigh.
Who's that?
He's the guy that bombed a building when I was a kid. I remember just reading about it, and it was like extremely traumatic for me.
Oh.
Yeah.
How so? Traumatic enough that it showed up at Freedom Session?
No, not that dramatic, but just that I'm thinking about it when I'm 41, and I'm guessing it happened. I mean, you could Google Timothy McVeigh, but it was just really tragic. It was like some government building or something, and he went and bombed it, and I don't know how many people died, but a lot of people died. And that was back before, the massive amounts of school shootings, right?
Yeah.
I remember,
he's in a Supermax prison, or is he dead?
I think he's died. But I even also remember, like, maybe you're too young, but do you remember like the Columbine school shooting?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was in 1996, and I was a kid, and it was just like,
it was a little bit later.
Okay.
I remember because I was when my dad came home. We used to get Time magazines growing up, and I
Yeah.
used to read them.
Well, that's where I was going to go with my story, but yeah, okay.
And so I remember the day that I would always read them as a little kid, the Time magazines,
Yeah.
and then along with the newspaper. And I remember my dad getting me a red Jolly Rancher from the grocery store that day, and I was eating a red Jolly Rancher when I was looking at the pictures in Time magazine of that shooting. And now every time I eat a red Jolly Rancher, I get a flashback.
Yeah, it's really tragic. It's interesting because my parents got the BC Report, which is probably like I think it was a pretty well-written magazine. Definitely was aligned with where we landed on a lot of things politically anyways. And I remember reading it as a kid often, and I remember reading about Clifford Olson as a kid. Pretty young.
Who's that?
Sorry, do you not know who Clifford Olson is?
No.
Okay, I know a lot of awful people that you do not know. Anyways, he was a serial killer in probably the 80s. I'm thinking in the 80s.
Where?
And I'm thinking maybe he's passed away now too. He was in Kent for a long time. He was in BC here.
Oh, okay.
And did a lot of awful things. Like a lot of, I won't even.
Indigenous women or?
I think all kinds of young girls and people and boys, and just really tragic. Anyways, it was so, I wonder if kids should be reading stuff like that. That's a question for debate. Some people would probably say it's not healthy.
I don't know. I
definitely made an impact on me.
I believe it. The world's an awful place, man. Like I was watching.
There's a lot of beautiful things that are happening too. It's very easy if you get, and this is way too many people spend too many times in dark places. And because everything is an algorithm on our phones, like we're often fed
more dark stuff.
Yeah,
right? Spend time in the Word.
Yeah.
But I was Tim Tebow, former quarterback, went on the Sean Ryan show this week, and he was talking about all the exploitation of kids and sex trafficking and abuse that happens with minors and child porn and stuff like that happens in the States. And like the numbers are just staggering. And something like 70% of the perpetrators are doing it to their own kids. And I'm just like, I have to turn it off. I have to walk away.
We're starting off pretty heavy.
It's just crushing.
Here. Let's go more light and fluffy. That was heavy. Sorry, I went to let's just. And I think of hurricanes. There's been a lot of tornadoes. Not hurricanes, tornadoes. There's been a lot of tornadoes lately.
Yeah,
there's definitely tornadoes in Oklahoma.
Yeah, that's right.
Right? There's been some monster tornadoes there.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Just hop in a bunker.
Does Trey have a bunker?
I don't know.
I'm sure he does.
I'm
sure he does.
I know he's a lot of guns. Yeah, he's going to take me shooting. He said he's going to do some training with me, some pistol training. And
one of the trips I want to do, have I ever told you this? I want to do the helicopter Texas shooting the wild boars from a helicopter.
Yeah, that's big.
So
that's big down there. Okay, start with the book.
Yeah, chase the fans way early. Sure.
Okay.
Chase the people.
Gary started reading when he got here.
Yeah,
so.
Did not read the chapter well ahead of time. It'll be obvious. I won't say too much.
So we're going through Gentle and Lowly, the heart of Christ for sinners and sufferers, one chapter a week. We're in chapter 15 of 23. Just a reminder why we picked this book, why I wanted to read it, is because I think it's so important to have a right theology of who God is. We think God is a boogeyman or something that he's not, we're not going to go to him. Anyway, this chapter is about his natural work and his strange work. He does not, and from Lamentations 3, verse 33, he does not afflict from his heart. And it goes and back into the Old Testament, talking about who God is. I think generally I hear a lot of perception that I've had myself, and also other people have, that in the Old Testament, God is a big, mean God, and in the New Testament, he's, kind and forgiving. But that's definitely not the case. And it goes through a bunch of different examples, and just talks about the heart of God, and also just, I think, practically just the different things that happened in the Old Testament. You think of just Israel and how they kept, running away from him, and he kept being merciful to them and calling them back over and over and over again. What do you think of the chapter?
That was pretty deep, pretty heavy. It wasn't one that you could really just quickly cruise through on short notice and probably be able to give a good commentary on. But yeah, I think I concur what you said. He gives a specific example from Hosea, kind of about, and I can't read all the names in there properly, pronounce them right, but just the idea of like, yeah, and I mean, we're all Israelites, right?
Yeah.
Is very interesting. I mean, I think we were taught that really well as kids, but you would read the Bible and read stories of people in the Old Testament, and as a kid, I guess I just didn't have the perspective of enough self-awareness, or maybe just how dumb and stupid I was. But like, yeah, in hindsight, like worse than the Israelites I am, but like just the idea of like, hey, God was very, very gracious, right? Yeah. And still gave them a lot of blessings and stuff. Despite
what really struck me is that they leave Egypt, right, and they get stuck in front of the Red Sea. They cry out to God. The ocean opens up. They walk through. They see Pharaoh and his whole army just get like drowned. And they have a big party. They dance, it says, and rejoice. 3 days later, they go to Mara,
and they're whining.
And their water isn't good; it's bitter, and they're just whining. Like 3 days after they got saved, and I mean, that's
most of us doesn't take that long. It doesn't take 3 days.
Exactly. Yeah.
That was the gist of where I was going with that, right? Where it's
so some things that stuck out to me was it says here, God is unswervingly just, like he's a just God. But what is his disposition? What is he on the edge of his seat eager to do? If you catch me off guard, you will what will leap out of me before I have time to regain composure, it will likely be grouchiness. But if you catch God off guard, what leaps out most freely is blessing, the impulse to do good, the desire to swallow us up in joy. That is why Goodwin says of God that is of all of his attributes seem to set out of his love. And he gives some quotes from the Old Testament of like, when Israel was a child, I loved him. It was I who taught Ephraim to walk. I took them up in their arms. I led them with cords of kindness, with the bands of love, and I bent down to feed them. And then it also says, my people are bent on turning away from me. And what is God's response? In Hosea 11, verse 8 and 9. How can I give up, O Ephraim? How can I hand you over, O Israel? My heart recoils within me. My compassion grows warm and tender. I will not execute my burning anger. I will not again destroy Ephraim, for I am God and not a man. The Holy One is in our midst, and I will not come in wrath. And I think it just goes against our idea of who God is. And I don't think it means that he is not a just God and has wrath, because it talks about the sermons from Jonathan Edwards, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God, and sermons from Thomas Goodwin, the justice of God is the damnation of sinners. But those two guys talked a lot about the Bible and preached on it, and still often emphasize he delights in mercy, but his judgment is a strange work, which is from the title of this chapter. What is most strange to him is his judgment, and what delights in most is his mercy. He doesn't delight in his wrath or his justice. He delights in his mercy. And I think that's the heart of God. I think it's amazing. I think that's when we see our own sin and see the brokenness in this world, that we can still have our beliefs drive our actions. When we really believe that, we will have the action of going to him. And then, so the end of the chapter basically summarizes that, and it says, left to our own natural intuitions about God, we will conclude that mercy is his strange work and judgment is his natural work. Rewiring our vision of God as we study the scripture, we see, helped by the great teachers of the past, that judgment is his strange work and mercy is his natural work. He does not afflict and grieve children of men, but not from his heart. He does afflict and grieve children of men, not from his heart. And it also goes and reflects, I think, the New Testament verse that says he disciplines those he loves. Right? That's pulls them to him. How is your view of God been shaped, and like how do you still view God now? Has this book had an effect on you and your willingness to like go to him when you see your own sin? And
I think so. I think the text that probably has been the most comforting to me, and I mean, I searched it here briefly, and like it's the verse, and it's over and over actually in the book of Psalms alone. The Lord is tender and kind. He is gracious. He is slow to get angry. He is full of love. Psalm 103:8. Psalm 86:15. But Lord, you are a God who is tender and kind. You are gracious. You are slow to get angry. Right. And I think that probably the other thing it says in here is that, God doesn't have parts, right? And I think that's where we as humans we have such limited ability to understand things. And so very quickly, it'll be our limited understanding. Like we'll put God in a box, right?
Yeah.
And then we'll make that the truth rather than just realize that the mystery of who God is pretty powerful, right? I thought that he talks a little bit about God's sovereignty and the beauty of utter divine sovereignty over all things good and bad, the stub toe, the poison ivy, the backstabbing friend, the chronic neck pain, the vomiting at 2 a.m., the wayward child, right? All these things. And then he quotes the Belgic Confession of Faith, Article 13, right? This doctrine gives us unspeakable comfort since it teaches us that nothing can happen to us by chance, but only by the arrangement of our gracious Heavenly Father who watches over us with fatherly care, sustaining all creatures under his lordship, so that not one of the hairs of our heads, for they are all numbered, which I mean, most of us don't live that way and we don't act that way, but that's how much God cares. Not even a little bird can fall to the ground without the will of our Father, it says, right? And I think, I guess I feel like I believe that, and I would pray that I would have faith in that. But I do think of people friends of mine that have lost kids, or people that have children that are, and that's the most extreme, one of the most extreme examples. But just awful things happen to people, right? You think, man, people do question that, right? And I think God can handle us questioning and wrestling, right?
yeah,
Faith is not even great. Men of great faith and women of great faith have pled with the Lord, right, for clarity on things. And so, yeah, I feel like that's the state I'm in sometimes. Like, man, that is tough, right? But yeah, he can handle it, and I think that's what we're called to do, is just to cry out to him, right? So
yeah, and trust the fact that we're not God, right? Like we don't understand. If we try to understand,
and we
everything,
shouldn't understand everything. That's what I always tell people, especially with bad things. And people are always like, "Oh, I can't understand how they did that," or "I can't understand why that would happen." Well, you're not supposed to. Like, if something's really awful, like, you just shouldn't get it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that just don't make sense, and they're a mystery, and they always will be as while we're on this earth, right? So, anyways.
And it's also a push against our depravity and how bad sin is, right? We try to always minimize the fact that we're, not that corrupt. I actually heard a quote today that said, how like it says power corrupts or money corrupts, and this person said, no, it's not that power and money corrupt. It's that power and money reveal our corruption. It was there all along, but this reveals
they just show it.
This lets it come out, and I thought that was a wise comment, which makes sense. Okay, you got a listener question. You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Why do many Protestant presentations of the gospel focus only on believing and accepting Jesus without emphasizing the true belief that true belief must result in obedience to him? You're putting a lot. I mean, the question is by nature putting, one brush on all Protestant churches. Because my first reaction was that, at least my experience growing up, was that that wasn't the case. That there was like your actions needed to be perfect, otherwise it proved you weren't a Christian, and that there was actually very little emphasis on believing and accepting Christ, and there was a ton of emphasis on behavior, needing to be perfect to prove that you were a Christian. But I also know that there's a lot of Protestant churches that are kind of more seeker friendly and are saying like, hey, everyone's welcome, you're forgiven, just believe in Jesus.
Believe.
And then there was no emphasis on the fact like, hey, as a result of that, your life will be different.
I think that is the teaching part. And I mean, we get that teaching, but I think that's the part that everywhere just need, that should be a result. I think the problem is when you preach to people as if none of them can be saved or are saved, then quickly it's like, hey, just look this way. And now you just have a bunch of
false,
just people that are really deceived. Behavior modified people that are just pretending. Yeah. And I mean, well, then essentially you just have you have the true meaning of a hypocrite where, and it'll never work.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's like, you're actually only going to really be that deep change is only going to come through the work of Jesus. Right. And I think that's where people,
and also people that don't talk about their sin or won't confess their sins because they always have this idea they have to be perfect and have all their stuff together. And so,
on the flip side, I think that question probably comes from a space where people are thinking, hey, these people actually have no idea their sin. Why would they ever think they need to be saved? They don't even realize they're sinful, right? And I think that probably, if you're preaching a sermon, you'd be like, hey, those are your ditches, right? And like, obviously you want to stay out of either ditch, and it'd be very easy to go either direction based on, your upbringing as a kid or based on your fear, right? Like you're going to be like, hey, is this easy? Are people deceiving themselves? Well, for sure they are. Like humans do that, right? I do think that if you're not just giving a very super surface level teaching, I mean, eventually you're going to move on from that spot of, hey, believe. And then it's like, well, then what? And like, how should your life live? And like, are you and that's where I think.
Well, if you look at most of Paul's letters to the churches in the New Testament, there isn't very much emphasis on you need to be saved. It's almost only talking about.
Well, it's because he's preaching to Christians.
That's right, and how to live.
He's writing letters to the church, and it was assumed that the people in the church were Christians.
Exactly,
right? And that's
otherwise, why would you go to church?
Yeah, why would you? But I mean, and I think that's where if you get into that spot of, when people are critiquing churches, like if churches, as a general rule, just picked whole books of the Bible and preached through them, right? And left no verses unspoken and dove into verses that were uncomfortable. And I've seen it before at many different churches where it's like they literally have the stop point or the stop, like they have it in a weird spot. I'm like, no, you're missing the whole, So, and even then, if you're preaching on a few verses, I would say, hey, you would probably want to read the chapter. Like you'd want to get the context, and then you'd want to even blow out a little bit, step a little bit further back and look at, hey, what was the point of the letter that Paul was writing to this church, right?
So John Calvin actually taught that. Taught pastors that preach chapter by chapter, verse through verse, for that reason.
Yeah.
And growing up, actually, we at nighttime they would preach through the Lord's Days, the Catechism, and they did that. The reason they said they did that was because so you didn't miss any of the parts of the different theologies in the Bible. You couldn't just pick one or the other. But I think, of course, more importantly, to do that with the Bible. But anyway, I texted Pastor Jonathan about it and asked what his thoughts were. And he said, it would probably depend on who I'm talking to, but I would agree. Belief and obedience go hand in hand. However, I think the Protestant emphasis comes from the fact that the order matters. Right action without right belief doesn't save or even happen. See Romans 8, verse 7 and 14, verse 23. Faith is what must precede our obedience. So the emphasis is a matter of order, not necessarily of importance. The other reason is that while true faith always results in fruit, obedience, we may not see it. The thief on the cross does not live long enough to do anything good, yet Jesus promises him salvation. Faith precedes good works. Both are part of salvation. And then he gives a quote from Martin Luther, which is, salvation is by faith alone, but not by a faith that is alone. Which I like. And
reminds me of another thing that we heard on Sunday. It was like, you can give without loving, but you can't love without giving, right?
Yeah. From Amy Carmichael.
Yeah.
What was it? I think it was written down here. One can give without loving, but one cannot love without giving.
Yeah.
Giving is the very nature. I mean, that's what God gave, right? He gave himself. And that is the ultimate, act of love. I think it also, it brings out certain things like, for example, the guy that sent in this question was talking about, if you do not forgive others, your Heavenly Father will not forgive you. So essentially holding a grudge can block your entrance to eternal life. And it reminds me of the example that Ken talks about in Freedom Session of the man that was owed a whole bunch of money to the king, whatever. I can't remember where it is. And the king forgave him. Then he had a guy that, owed him a little bit of money. And he's like,
10 denarii or whatever.
whatever, I'm going to send you to jail for not owing me this. And how, like, we've been so forgiven so much by God. How can we not forgive the people that have hurt us, even though it might even be extreme hurt? Think of like Trevor and things like that. So, but I think there is just we also can't demand it, right? And be like, you have to forgive now. Like, there is like healing takes time, but we also got to make sure there's no excuses.
Interesting.
What part?
Chicken and the egg. Like I say, I think people get really uncomfortable with things that it's just way easier to go after what other people are doing wrong than it is to just worry about what we're doing wrong.
Yes.
That's really what.
Yeah.
It's just so much easier, right? Because we have our whole frame of reference of how we think everything should be worded and said and taught. And then if something goes against that, we don't assume that we might be wrong. We just cannot believe how somebody else could be so offside, right? It's fascinating.
And one of the things that I was taught in the coaching principles when you're coaching someone is that people naturally look for evidences of things that they already believe. So if you have a set belief already on whatever it is, you look for evidence in your worldview, how you're looking at things, to prove that's already true. We don't naturally challenge your own beliefs or how.
Well, it's too unsettling.
Exactly. Yeah. But you can really be offside, right?
Some people get really honest about that too, and it's really fascinating and it's really cool.
Yeah, I mean that's when change happens.
Yeah, but it's terrifying, right? Because usually there's a lot of things that are attached to that, from family to friends to everything, especially in a situation where it's like, hey, this is really going to rattle cages, right?
Yeah, and then it goes back to trust in God. You trust God will keep you safe in whatever He's asking you to do to move forward in faith. Like, is He enough? Are you willing to, like, what does it say? Lose dad and mom and sons and daughters for my sake? Like, will you give it all up? Like, will you give up? Like that one guy at Freedom Session, he was like, he felt God had challenged him early on in his career. Do you think you'd give up your career in aviation for me? And he resisted it, for a long time. And I think we have these things in our life that we're not willing to give up, if it's our money or if it's our time or if it's our image, whatever it is. Yeah, it is challenging. That reminds me of something else. So Trey sent me a quote this week. He's like, I think this is a good quote on coaching and how he I guess how he wanted to approach things. So it's a little bit longer, but I'll read it. I want you to act and take on a role of my brutally honest high-level advisor. Speak to me like I'm a founder, creator, or a leader with massive potential, but who also has blind spots, weaknesses, or illusions that need to be cut through immediately. I don't want comfort. I don't want fluff. I want the truth that stings, if that's what it takes to grow. Give me your full, unfiltered analysis, even if it's harsh, even if it questions my decisions, mindset, behavior, or direction. Look at my situation with complete objectivity and strategic depth. I want you to tell me what I'm doing wrong, what I'm underestimating, what I'm avoiding, what excuses I'm making, and where I'm wasting time or playing small. Then tell me what I need to do, which isn't coaching, but then tell me what to do, think, or build in order to actually get me to the next level. With precision, clarity, and ruthless prioritization. If I'm lost, call it out. If I'm making a mistake, explain why. If I'm on the right path but somehow moving too slow or with the wrong energy, tell me how to fix it. Hold nothing back. Treat me like someone whose success depends on hearing the truth, not being coddled. That definitely is coming from a guy that was in the special forces.
Yeah. But not everybody will want to be spoken to that way.
Yeah. Well, you have to want it, right? I mean, comfort kills. You have to be uncomfortable for change to happen. And sometimes you're forced into it. I mean, I often tell people that know my story and all the details in it. They're like, how did that happen? How did you choose to go pursue the path of change and trying to get better? And I often remind people like, hey, I remember Nicole clearly saying to me, deal with the pain of what happened to you as a kid, or deal with the pain of not being married, because you can't have both. And so I always say hey, I was kind of, I had to make a choice.
Yeah. Often we're forced.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to know going all different rabbit trails here. I'd be curious to know if we have any listeners in Ontario, what the real estate market's like in Ontario. Because everything I hear is just like Toronto region, unmitigated disaster.
Like everything's falling?
Falling. Not selling.
Not so.
Sales way down. Um, I listened to this one podcast where they talk a lot about like the pre-sale condos, which is a huge issue in Vancouver too. I met with a developer this morning, actually for lunch today, and he was talking about how there's like 2,000 empty apartments right now in Vancouver that are vacant, not selling. And so it's interesting how I find it fascinating as someone that's probably always been a bit of a Debbie Downer and thinking, hey, like we don't have that much of a lack of supply.
Yeah.
There are way too many people coming in the country in a short amount of time. But it's how quickly we went from that, oh, there's never be enough houses to like build more houses to like, no, like.
Well, also houses that people can afford.
Well,
like who can afford a condo in Vancouver?
Yeah. So that's interesting that you say it. So that was part of the conversation because that's exactly what he said. It's like, well, where do we find the affordable place? And I would argue in Chilliwack even, the standard of what is you're going to live in now is very different than 20 years ago, at least at this moment. I think it could correct more, but most people could afford a $250,000, $300,000 place, and you can buy a 2-bedroom, $250,000.
Really?
Yes.
In Chilliwack?
Yes.
It's a condo though.
It's a condo, but like there again, that's what I mean. Like, why should you get to live in a detached home and like, you know what I mean? If you go to Europe or whatever, I'm assuming that it's very expensive to buy a detached home in a big city in Holland, right?
Yeah.
None of our family members are buying place there. And so it's interesting in Toronto market, I think as of today of like May 20th, when we're recording this, come out a week later, there was like 3,000 sales so far this month in May. Well, normal 10-year average, I think is 10,000. So like it's like sales are off a cliff, right? And
so I would agree that no one's owed a detached home or whatever it is, but I also think it's because of terrible management
that prices are so high.
That's and fair. That like the poor people are getting poor,
and they will continue to. Like if there's one thing that, like without getting too political, if you saw the previous mayor of Vancouver is now in Canada is the housing minister in Mark Carney's government.
Yeah.
And he was asked point blank, like, oh, we have a housing crisis. Yeah, we do. Do you think house price should come down? No, I don't think they should come down. Right? Like nobody wants to be the one that says, hey, all of you, because people in Canada use their houses as an ATM. I think way more than the US, but there again, I'd be curious to hear a US listener's perspective.
Yeah, if you are a US listener, like what is it in your area?
What's the perspective? Yeah, what's the perspective? Because in Canada, and I've seen it my whole life, and I see it on the lending end, where people bought a house in 2003, let's say. I saw 2 of these situations recently. They needed a loan on the house, and 2003, what a house costs in Abbotsford or Chilliwack in 2003, it cost $200,000, $300,000 at the very, very most, right?
Yeah.
And these people now owe $750,000 on a house that's worth $850,000, $950,000.
Yeah.
Right? And they got it appraised, and it appraised at 1.1, and they should be able to borrow more money because they still got a little bit of room left in equity, right? Before the 75% loan to value. So I just see those situations where, and it's not talked about enough, but people literally just use and people all do it. And sometimes for good things. Sometimes people are renovating their house and you could justify, hey, you increase the value. And if you're going to spend $60,000 on a kitchen, nobody has $60,000 laying around, so you're going to refinance your house, right? I do think it becomes very easy way to just live beyond your means by refinancing.
But you're a slave to whatever you're indebted to, is one thing, and also I think it's just everyone wants to keep up with the Joneses. It's just natural to us. I remember when I went to Africa in 2011 or 2012, whatever, Guinea, I drove a Chevy Cavalier.
Are there Joneses in Africa?
Yeah, there is. It's the human heart. Yeah. But I had a Chevy Cavalier, and so I went to Guinea. Conakry was the capital city, like 2 million people, had like one traffic light in the whole city. My car would have been one of the nicest cars in the street there. And I was like thinking about that. I was like, wow, this is insane. You come back here and it's a crappy car, right? And so, if your old crappy kitchen would it be the nicest kitchen in the whole city, then all of a sudden you're okay with it. But because it's not, we have this idea that it has to be improved. And I was actually listening to a sermon from John Piper this week about the rich young ruler and how he was sad when God told him he had to give up everything to follow him. And he was talking about what is like being rich, like easier for a rich man, harder for a rich man, easier for a camel to enter the eye of a needle than a rich man to enter into heaven. And he goes, what's a rich man? And he goes, do you have air conditioning at home? Do you have heat? He goes, are you able to go to the hospital? You're probably rich. And I always had this idea that it was like rich people where people had big companies and stuff like that. But you live in North America, you're making if you have a house, you have all those things, you're already rich, right? It's easy not to lean on God and just lean on yourself and your own stuff you have going on.
Yeah. So anyways, be interesting for the perspective of the people actually boots on the ground. I mean, in Chilliwack, you just see listings, more and more listings. And I sold a place this last week, but priced very sharp, very nice place, priced very sharp. Like, and that's kind of what you're seeing. Nice places priced right. So outside of that, good luck.
Reminds me of in the gold rush back in the day, it was all the merchants in town that actually got rich because they were selling their boots and everything else.
People.
Yeah. So same thing.
All the
nowadays.
poor suckers that came. I mean, we are
high
entering
real estate or low real estate. The realtors are still making bank.
No, they're not. They're not. The realtors are starving right now. Yeah, there'd be lots of realtors quitting. Way too many. Like the number of realtors I think in CAD Rev and Chilliwack, I want to say doubled from 2019 to 2022 or something.
Yeah, I believe that.
Everybody and their dog became a realtor, including myself.
Okay, another question. Can you be bold and humble at the same time? Can you be confident without being cocky? How do you lead or speak up without making it all about you?
I don't know. I would do it by being self-deprecating and well, no, I've had lots of hard conversations with people, right?
I wouldn't say it's self-deprecating as much as being honest about your own weaknesses.
Yeah, fair enough. But I said that tongue in cheek because being self-deprecating, I think, is healthy. But no, I think the idea of just being...
I think the answer is yes. You can be bold and humble.
Yeah,
I would say often humility is daring to be bold, because often being bold means that people
you're risking something.
You're risking something. People aren't going to like you. I mean, if you stand for something, you're going to have enemies of some sort.
Yeah, I do feel like the most effective way to be bold would be to be in a one-on-one relationship. Like the idea of being publicly bold, that matters too, and I'm sure we're called to do that. But I think the idea of the most effective way is to have a relationship, like close relationship with somebody, and then make an impact in that relationship and speak truth. And that's really lost. And you see that everywhere. You see that where people are complete mouthpieces behind a keyboard, completely opinionated on a podcast.
Yeah.
But in a one-to-one relationship, would they actually say, hey, like, would they threaten that relationship and say, hey, this is something that's kind of bothering me, right? But all of us have just as much stuff as someone else. So I think there's a very gentle way that you could approach it.
And lead by example, because if you're challenging other people, but you're not letting yourself get challenged yourself.
Oh, I struggle with that.
Then
I hate being critiqued. That's my feelings.
Better than it used to be.
Better, yeah. Better. It still stings though. It stings to be called out on your stuff.
Yeah. I think you're doing it consistently. I mean, I like, we talked about it a couple episodes ago with Dave Curry. He's just like, I get, every single week, my buddy asks me, like, how are you treating your wife? Are you reading your word every day?
I think it's worse when you actually think you're doing relatively well. I mean, I for sure get critiqued in my marriage. And it's like, okay, you think you're putting in effort. And it's like, oh no, you're still sucking. Suck.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm trying, right?
Yeah.
And that can be discouraging.
Yeah.
But there again, if it's done in love and you know that the person is, like I say, they're risking something being honest. So it's pretty cool when you can just be that's an authentic relationship, right? Where you can just share what's really going on.
You also have to invite it. Right, because there's some people that if you do it, like I've definitely challenged lots of guys that just now avoid me, and that's okay. Like I'm not gonna chase you down if you don't want it, then that's up to you, right? You have to put yourself in a position to be challenged. So, I got another message here. Why do we struggle so much with rest? Why is it so hard to slow down? I mean, we've talked about this a bunch already.
Yeah, I feel like we've talked about it a lot. We're Dutch people. Dutch people are workaholics by nature. Most Dutch people will struggle with overworking, not underworking. And it's fascinating because I just had a meeting with somebody yesterday who talked about another person in a bit of a negative way. And it was just exactly that they're not that, the words were, they're not that motivated. Like compared to what?
Yeah.
So
I'm
funny.
sure a lot of people
so much
that would have
idle.
observed Jesus when he walked on earth in real time.
But I thought he was pretty lazy.
Yes.
a lot of resting.
Yeah.
I don't know if he rested per se, but
he talks about
just take a break.
Yeah.
It's a cultural thing for us.
And it's an avoidance thing, right? You don't have to, if you take time to rest, you have to start thinking and become more aware of reality. So, okay. Property taxes notices are out. Connected to rental prices are dropping. What does this sentence say? How about you just explain?
It's just my notes. I was just fascinated because I met with an employee who said he was paying 10% more in property tax this year.
Mm.
And he has a nice house, but still it's like $4,000. It's almost, 350 some dollars a month for property tax. It's not affordable. And it's fascinating because this happens a lot in cities. Now older seniors can defer their property taxes. I think once you're over 55, I think you can defer them indefinitely, if I'm not mistaken. And then the money gets paid when the place sells. I think you have to have no mortgage on the property, if I'm correct. Maybe it doesn't matter, but it's just fascinating how governments are people keep getting raises. Everybody in the public sector just keeps getting lifts. And like now we're in this phase where like, they got to keep kind of decreasing property taxes and lower taxes in the city of Chilliwack. Like nobody's going to get paid less at the city of Chilliwack or anywhere else, right? That's just not the way it's going to go. But yet homeowners, as people are losing jobs, it should. And I mean, I feel really strongly about
need some bold politicians.
Some bold politicians, yeah. Don't even have to be humble, just bold. No, but I just think the idea of giving people a haircut ever just never works, right? Nobody wants to work for less when they got paid a certain amount. And in fairness, I mean, the person that's working at the city, let's say, they're paying more for everything too. Inflation's real. And that's why when you go through these bursts of spending like we've had in the last 5 years, all under the guise of protecting people and, helicopter money and all this crap that's happened, it's so detrimental in the long run to the least fortunate, right? Because they're the people that are, if you look at a person that's on old age security, or you look at a person that's on some type of welfare,
think of single moms,
long-term disability,
don't own a property, right? They have to work themselves. Their gas goes way up. Their groceries go way up. Their rent goes way up.
Yeah.
Like
everything gets passed on.
Yeah. It's
now in this environment, like we're in an environment of money, like cash money, fiat currencies going up again, like having some worth. And that is in turn going to lead to a lot of things coming down in price, which to me, it's interesting that energy's not, like oil's not, because oil prices are very depressed. Like oil's really low, like pretty low right now. I think we're at like $60 a barrel or something. And like gas is still like $1.60. It makes no sense to me. Insane. But rents are for sure dropping. And that's very supply and demand, and it's very attached to housing, right? So you know what? You'll see people that are like own a house and are desperate to rent it out. They'll drop the price of rent to get a good tenant, right? So that's encouraging because a huge amount of people are renting. So,
okay, last topic here. The Bible summarizes the law in two sentences. It says, "Love God above all else, and love your neighbor as yourself."
Yeah.
How do you love yourself? What does it mean to love yourself in that way?
I guess I would view it as a child or somebody created by God, right? And that's a really special thing. I think of like the session in Freedom Session where you kind of like look at the fact that you were conceived, that God had a plan for your life, even though sometimes that starts in a very negative way. I mean, there's people that are,
even rape.
Yeah. So I think like no matter what your story is, that's really there again, that's a very extreme example, but people just often have childhoods of not feeling wanted. Sometimes just simply because parents are too busy. Maybe they're busy for even valid reasons, but they're just like, that doesn't matter to a kid, right? They can't process that.
How do you love yourself? Do you love yourself?
I think I do, yeah. My wife would say I'm in love with myself.
I mean,
just kidding.
It's interesting how like just the idea of it almost like is.
I can say no. I can say as someone that used to hate myself.
Yes.
When I was in my late teens, early 20s, and even knew at that moment that I shouldn't. Where it was like I had this very weird, like all kinds of emotional issues, which I often try to relay to younger people that are struggling because I'm like, this too shall pass. Just do the right things. A lot of people are always trying to like feel okay in the moment. I'm like, no, sometimes you just got to push through, and the maturity and the wisdom and the understanding will come, or God's going to give it to you in time. Maybe you just but for me, it was like I had a good job, I had a loving family, and I still felt totally worthless and had serious self-esteem issues. And so,
well, treat yourself. You treat others how you treat yourself.
Yeah, but I just think I don't view myself I don't view myself as a worm, and I don't view myself as an amazing person. Like I know I'm neither. I know I'm nothing except by the grace of God. So that's how I view myself. And does that mean I love myself? I just think like,
well, I think first I think we have to back up and take, okay, what does it mean to love yourself? What does like love mean? And so I got that from 1 Corinthians 13, 4-7, gives a definition of love. So love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude. It does not demand its own way. It is not irritable, and it keeps no record of being wronged. It does not rejoice about injustice, but rejoices whenever the truth wins out. Love never gives up, never loses faith. It's always hopeful and endures through every circumstance.
But But, and I know where you're going with this. There's other verses, I think, I should know this, but I think there's other verses that talk distinctly about thinking others, putting others above ourselves. So I do think that as much as like that verse would specifically be talking about loving others, not necessarily caring that way for ourselves. Would you not agree or would you disagree?
I think it's both. I think love
Okay.
others as you love
Okay.
yourself. And so I don't think loving yourself means you have to like, think you're greater than everybody.
No.
I mean, I think it means to be patient with yourself, to not be jealous, not be boastful, to not demand, like be demanding of yourself, like do better, do better. Like I think it's those just very practical things. I think sometimes we have, when we think of like loving yourself is like this, like high-minded, like I'm greater than everyone sort of thing. But I don't think that's a good definition of love. I think that's like just wrong. So, anyways, I think it's important though. Like if we are created in the image of God, and we have to respect that. Yeah,
I would agree.
I mean, it's interesting growing up that like we had to like respect our bodies, so we're not allowed getting cremated. We have to respect our bodies, so we can't get tattoos, etc. But then like when it comes to like how we view ourselves, or like you're just a sinner, you're just a piece of crap, or just like work yourself to death because you basically have no value. But don't cremate yourself though, and it's like this double standard. And yeah. So thanks for listening, guys. As always, like, comment, share, subscribe, and we want your feedback. So if you have feedback, send it in. If you send it in a voice message or in a video, we'll react to that as well. Yeah, see you next week.
Have a great week.